So what makes a badass? I guess being the son of Odin, called the god of thunder, always helps. But anyway, what we're going to do here is I'm going to share a little something with you. Because what we're going to talk about is badass moments in comic books. Because there's a difference between a fight and dealing with a badass. And I'm going to get there. These videos might be a series, and they're going to be short. We're not going to review the whole comic. It's going to be getting right to that page in the comic book where you have a badass moment. And, you know, I'll add the page and stuff in the video. So basically, if anybody has ever seen my videos and stuff, you know, a lot of people know that I can whip out a book and remember when I bought it, what was going on around me and stuff. This is not one of those times. And it's one of those things where I've accepted that it's not going to happen, that I want to remember the book, because of the event that happened around it was much more shocking and actually terrifying for me in a real life situation, not like in a horror movie situation. I think I was about 13 or 14, and it was Wednesday. Got off school, went home, got my money I saved up. It's probably $5 or $6, and I went to walk to Magic Mart. I was the kid that walked all over town. It was almost like in my hometown, it's like if visitors came to town or tourists or whatever, people from out of town came, you had to go check out the kid walking through town. You know, it's like I was the town's kid, the mascot. And I walked into Magic Mart, and when you walked into Magic Mart, Wednesdays is when they got the new comics. They put them on a spinner rack. When you walk through the doors of Magic Mart, there would be video games and those claw machines, and then you walk through another set of doors, and right directly in front of you would be like candy, school supplies. Behind those would be the toys. Over here to your left would be the cash registers, the movies, the cassettes, and the music and stuff. And then over here to your right would be the magazines, the Xerox machine where you could actually copy stuff out of the magazines, like the video games and stuff, codes and stuff. You wouldn't really have to buy it. And the spinner rack of comics, and then beyond that would be like carpets, and then the clothes. You know, you knew the store. You know. So the first thing that happens when I walk in, and there's actually this mom there with her two kids, and the two kids actually looked like they were. The oldest kid was maybe my age, if not a year younger. Then he had a little brother who was probably about 4 years younger than him, which is how old, you know, the difference between my brother and I. So you get now to set the scene what I walked into. The mom has a comic book, and she's yelling at her kid, and she's just going through this comic, going, look at this, page after page of violence. Why would you want to read this? Why would you want to read this? Why, you know, just going off on them. And she was young and 80s hot. You know, I don't know how old she was when she had these kids, but this chick could still pass for like 25 or 26, but I don't know. Big hair, 80s outfit, you know, late 80s. Okay, and then her two kids. This is what was the most terrifying thing. They were dressed in outlandish suits. You really felt for the kids, man. They looked ridiculous. She had them in, only thing I can describe as sailor suits. Matching sailor suits. Kids 12, 13 years old, and she's got them in a sailor suit, complete with a hat and little shorts and little shiny shoes, and couldn't believe what I was seeing. And they're matching, okay? And you can just tell that this, you know, they're just looking at this mom, at their mom, just, you know, dying to be a boy and all this stuff. And she's just putting down the fact that they want to read a comic book. Yet I'm thinking, how can this comic book damage them with this violence you're trying to shelter them from in a comic book? And look what you're doing to them. She was a prime example of what happens when you go from dressing your dolls straight to having kids. It's not a good thing. You got to have that gap and then grow up a little bit, and then you can handle the responsibility of realizing your kids are not gigantic dolls for you to take up. And I got real judgmental as I got older. This always put it in my head. I mean, this event stayed in my head because I felt real lucky all of a sudden, man. The crap I was dealing with at my house, I could walk out the door and get away from it. These kids, they were under the wing of this woman, and as I got older and saw other women like this, I started picturing her as, you know, real hot, and she married a sugar daddy who was, you know, probably 20 years older than her, and he was ready to sit down and have a family, and she was ready to like marry for money and security and raise his kids and be took care of and all this stuff. And the kids, in a weird way, the kids were paying for it. It was George Carlin had a term called sophisticated child abuse, and that's kind of what I saw, man. It was just these poor kids. I was just terrified. I was like, good God, what if? What if? It was like the flip side of what I was living in, and I was like, oh my God. All of a sudden, I felt very lucky, very lucky. So as this is going over there, and I'm having these shocking feelings and kind of a numb feeling. I mean, this is completely new to me. I never saw anything like this. I'm just like, and now I'm on to the comic book after watching the kids walk away and just follow her like two little ducklings following a mother duck, and they're just beat before they even had a chance to fight. I go over there and I get the comic and I'm looking through it, and I just kind of looked down at the lady, man, and she saw me look at her. She was at the cash register, and we locked eyes for a minute. And I looked at this comic book and I looked at her, and I was like, I shook my head at her. There was no fight. I just remembered that what was in it was badassery. And this is why it's always stayed in my head. To me, two people can have a fight. A fight's where it goes back and forth. The two people are even, or maybe you might have a little bit of an underdog there. That's what makes the fights interesting, and they can go page to page, and it's a great Jack Kirby thing. There's nothing wrong with a fight. But a badass is somebody who comes in and they do something and there is no fight. It ends. It's the lack of violence is what got me. And that's why I didn't have the words to look at this lady like she doesn't know what she's talking about. You know, I mean, you know, these poor kids can't even read a comic book, you know. And that's kind of always stayed with me. It was because of that very moment I knew what a moment in a comic book was. Okay? And you don't get a lot of that nowadays. You really don't. You get a moment. And I'm going to give you an example here. What we're talking about today is Thor 281. This is from 1978. Mark Grunwald, Ralph Macchio did the script. Keith Pollard, Pablo Marcus did the pencils and inks. Now, just to give you a real quick rundown, Thor has ended up in limbo, timeless plane of existence that Immortus runs and stuff. Immortus is messing with him. He gets to limbo. His hammer is gone. Now, this is back in the days where Thor was separated from his hammer for 60 seconds. Bam, he turns back to Don Blake, and he's getting attacked by creatures, and he's got an even bigger creature named Tempest waiting on him, which he also has a badass moment in this. Alright? So what happens? He doesn't turn to Don Blake, but it's time to fight. He's a freaking Viking, man. Alright? Not a problem. But he's missing Mjolnir. He's taking this cape, he's packing it through, you know, there's tanks and all this stuff in there, and here in Limbo, and he's picking up stuff, and he's putting shards of metal in his cape, and he's throwing it, and he's releasing it, and all of a sudden you got shrapnel coming at you, and he's kicking ass, and he's like, oh, I miss my Mjolnir. So what does he do? He jumps on top of a freaking tank. I don't know how much those things weigh, but I'm going to say like 6 tons. I don't know. And he jumps on the tank. And then not only does he jump on the tank, he picks up the tank. And he starts wadding the tank into this ball. And he keeps compressing it, making it smaller and smaller. He's not shaving any mass off that. There's nothing getting away from this. And he just molds it and molds it and molds it. And then like the 6-ton hammer looks like yonder. He's like, yeah, that feels alright. And he starts having a badass moment, man. He starts clubbing things and throwing it and showing him why he's God of Thunder. Bam, fight over. And I'm going to include the page in the video and stuff. So it was a great badass moment that I was thoroughly impressed with, and cannot wait to maybe come up with our next badass moment in comics.